slick talker since a jet.
Winter time, all the time, ooh, yeah. Look at the way that I move, swag. Disrespectful and I'm rude, okay. I had cocaine in the school.
Hello guys and welcome to part 5 to What If Tanjiro Was a Player. Now I was kind of postponing this because I wanted season 2 to get to the end or kind of finish before I put this out to avoid many spoilers. Because I'm trying to put the Mugen Train arc and the Entertainment District arc into this, or a large majority of the Entertainment District arc. Meaning I could be ending this What If at the moment right here, or I could be finishing it next part. Meaning I will not be going into the Swordsmith Village arc. At least I don't think I will. But yeah, that's really all I have to say. My Discord is linked in the description below. There won't be a like goal on this since this is possibly the last part. And make sure to leave a positive comment down below and tell me if you enjoyed this. But let's get right into it. The last place I left off, Rui and Tanjiro fought. Tanjiro beat him within seconds with no difficulty. Zenitsu and Inosuke were injured just like they were in canon. And once again, much like in canon, they were saved by Giyu and Shinobu. And Tanjiro was told to report back to the Demon Slayer headquarters to meet with the master. So let's get right back into it. Tanjiro would look around and he seen that Zenitsu and Inosuke were being cared for by the medical team. He would look around again and he would see Giyu. He would also see some woman with a butterfly pin in her hair. This would be Shinobu. But he seen everything was under control, so he set off away from the mountain toward headquarters because he had somewhere to be. Eventually Tanjiro would make it back to Demon Slayer headquarters, but his crow would tell him to go to the back of the head mansion. So Tanjiro complied and went. Upon making it to the back of the head mansion, he would see a man standing there. He had grotesque features on his face that could only be caused by some kind of disease. Tanjiro would then speak up and say, "Excuse me, I was told to come here." The man would then say, "Yes, I'm aware. I told you to come here via the crow. My name is Kagaya. I am the head of the Demon Slayer Corps, and I'm not going to attempt to say his last name. I'm going to slander the hell out of that." Tanjiro would then say, "I'm sorry," as he would get down on one knee and tilt his head down. Kagaya would then chuckle and say, "It doesn't really matter. I can't even tell what you're doing. I'm blind." Kagaya would then tell Tanjiro to come sit down. He had to talk to him. Tanjiro would comply as he would get up and walk over to the porch and sit down. Kagaya would then explain to Tanjiro how he had been watching over him for a very long time. He would explain how he was aware of his demon sister, Tamayo, and all of that, and how strong he was. But then Kagaya would quickly say, "I harbor no ill intentions toward them." This would bring a fast relief over Tanjiro. Kagaya would then go on to explain how the Demon Slayer Corps was established. And I can't explain that right now because of spoilers. But after this conversation, Tanjiro would be shocked, but suddenly Kagaya would begin to cough up blood. After Kagaya wiped the blood away from his mouth, he would explain that he was going to die soon. This would bring worry and concern to Tanjiro, but Kagaya would then call out for his two daughters. But then two little girls, one with white hair and one with black hair, would come beside Kagaya. One of them would grab each of their father's hands as they would begin to guide him through the mansion. Kagaya would tell Tanjiro to follow. Kagaya, his two daughters, and Tanjiro would walk through the mansion as they would make it back to the front of the mansion. They would walk through the front door before walking all the way to the end of the front deck. The two little girls would let go of Kagaya's hands as they would say, "The master has arrived." Tanjiro would then look upon 9 individuals bowing. This would be the 9 Hashira. Kagaya would then say, "You can raise your head, and I introduce to you your new fellow Hashira." Tanjiro would then look around confused, but suddenly he realized that Kagaya was talking about him. Most of the Hashira were confused, especially Giyu, because he knew Tanjiro was strong, but he didn't expect him to rise to the rank of Hashira in just a mere 2 years, even though it's not completely unheard of. But he was happy to see that Tanjiro was still alive. And most of the other Hashira are confused because when a Demon Slayer becomes a Hashira, they're already known throughout the corps for their abilities and skills. But Tanjiro didn't have this. He wasn't from some special house like Rengoku either. He was just some random guy. Kagaya would then say, "Tanjiro has actually reached the rank of Hashira well over a year and a half ago. He was just never aware of it. He killed well over 50 demons, the requirement to reach Hashira, within just 3 months. He also killed each of the lower moons at least once within just 6 months. Kagaya would then go on to say, "He is more than qualified to be a Hashira and set amongst all of you. So just take my word and accept him as a fellow Hashira." Many of the Hashira would accept him after hearing this, such as Gyome, Uzui, Rengoku, Mitsuri, Shinobu, Giyu. Even the Miss Hashira, Muichiro, was impressed by his feats and didn't really care at all, but he had the master's word, so he accepted Tanjiro. Iguro and Sanemi were kind of skeptical, but that's just how their personalities work. But since the master believed in him and they had the master's word, they just accepted him. The Hashira meeting was then disbanded and everyone went their separate ways. Tanjiro would hang around the Demon Slayer headquarters for the upcoming days, and every day he would visit Inosuke and Zenitsu since they were the closest people he had to call friends. And as much as he didn't want to admit it, he actually did care for them. But since Tanjiro wasn't getting any more missions, he decided to actually start doing some training, since he never had the chance to do this within the past 2 years since he was always on missions. So Tanjiro trained for the next month. Within this month, his dagger mastery would reach max, and a few of his other skills would also level up. Tanjiro also worked on his breathing, so he had to take no former or extra precautions when using Hinonami Kagura. He wanted to achieve complete and utter concentration breathing. But one night when he was taking well-concentrated, deep, sharp breaths built for using any form of Hinonami Kagura, the screen would pop up in his head and it would say, "New memories unlocked." Tanjiro would then open his eyes as he would see that he was not at the headquarters anymore. In fact, he was at his old home. Tanjiro would then look around himself as he seen two people standing close by. It would be a man and a woman, and the man would be holding a baby. The man and the woman, and even the baby, looked very similar to Tanjiro. This is because they are his ancestors. As suddenly Tanjiro would look in the same direction as the man and the woman. There he would see some man wearing his same earrings, with red hair and a red kimono wielding a katana. This would be Yoruichi. As just seconds later, Tanjiro would watch Yoruichi perform all 12 forms of the Hinonami Kagura dance. But there was something different about this. These moves were much more refined and much more controlled. They also had much more power behind them. As then Yoruichi pulled back as he performed the 13th form. It was a constant flow of the previous 12 forms in an absolute concentrated loop. Tanjiro would stand there as he watched all the forms be formed again and again as he burned them into his mind. His concentration would be broken though as Yoruichi would stop and walk back up to the house. He would take off his earrings and place them in the man's hand as he would say, "That is all 13 forms of sun breathing." Yoruichi would then say, "I want you to pass them down through your family and use them wisely." Yoruichi would then turn and walk away. And finally, Tanjiro understood why it was called Hinonami Kagura, which translates to Dance of the Fire God. Because as Yoruichi was performing all 13 forms of sun breathing, he looked as if he was a god dancing, wielding fire. Dance of the Fire God. Then Tanjiro's consciousness would be broken, as he would blink and open his eyes again and he would be back at the Demon Slayer headquarters. But right the next morning, Tanjiro would continue to work on his breathing, and this time he would try to perfect his sun breathing. And this would go on for the next 14 to 15 days. At the end of this 15 days, Tanjiro had pretty much mastered the skill of breathing without taking precautions for any form of sun breathing. Meaning he didn't even have to think about breathing before using a sun breathing attack. And he'd also nearly perfected every single form of sun breathing except for the 13th form. He could get just about halfway through it before his lungs would begin to burn up and his body gave out. He was going to need a little bit more training, but he could definitely perfect it eventually. Also within this time, Zenitsu and Inosuke got healed up and they went through their recuperation training and got a bit stronger. Also within this time, every lower moon was killed by Muzan, and Enmu was the only one left alive. A few days after these events, Tanjiro was given a mission to go investigate a place where tons of people keep on going missing. And Zenitsu and Inosuke tagged along, but the thing is, they were going to have to take the Mugen train to get there since it was quite far away. So all three of them made it to the closest town, and they made it to the train station and they snuck onto the train. All three of them would make it through the carts before they made it to a cart where they heard a man yelling, "Delicious." They made it up to a seat and they would see the flame Hashira, Rengoku. Kyojuro would put down his food as he welcomed his fellow Hashira Tanjiro and his friends. Everyone would take a seat, but suddenly they would hear a scream. Tanjiro and Rengoku would immediately blitz off toward the scream. They would burst through the cart door, and as they would see a demon holding up a woman, Tanjiro would be the first to strike as he would cut off the demon's hand, freeing the woman. Rengoku would then cut the head off of the demon, killing it. Tanjiro would sheath his katana as he would put his hand on the wall of the train, and Tanjiro could sense something was very wrong here. He would then tell Inosuke and Zenitsu and Rengoku something was off about the train. He then told them to stay here and watch out. He was going to go do something. He would step outside as he climbed on top of one of the train carts. He would begin to run across the top of the train carts toward the conductor cart. But before he could, he ran across a demon. This would be Enmu. Enmu would laugh maniacally as he would say, "You weren't supposed to be here yet." Enmu would face the back of his hand toward Tanjiro, revealing the mouth on it. Just as Enmu was about to use his demon blood art to send Tanjiro unconscious, Tanjiro would blitz forward, cutting his hand clean in half. Tanjiro would then bring his blade upwards, and with one sun-breathing slash, he would cut Enmu's head off. But despite this, Enmu's body would not begin to disintegrate. Enmu would begin to laugh as his body began to sink into the train, as suddenly the entire inside of the train would begin to turn flesh-like as tentacles would shoot out from everywhere trying to attack the passengers. But Zenitsu would get so startled from this, he would fall unconscious and he would enter his, unconscious state. From there, Zenitsu, Inosuke, and Rengoku would blitz all around the train, destroying all the tentacles, protecting all of the passengers. While they were doing this, Tanjiro quickly made his way to the conductor cart. He landed inside of the conductor cart, and as soon as he turned his back to the conductor tried to attack him, but he trapped him on the neck, knocking him out. He sensed around in the conductor cart, and he could tell the main point was right under him. So he punched the ground, and with his immense strength, he ripped it up. There he seen the nape of the train, which was Enmu's. As Tanjiro rose his sword up as he was about to slice it in half, destroying it, killing Enmu for good, the conductor cart turned flesh-like as a bunch of eyeballs spawned around him. As they all blinked, they all sent him unconscious for just a brief second, as suddenly Tanjiro would be standing in a forest beside his house as he would see his whole family happy. But just as the illusion came, Tanjiro would say none of this is real. And because of this, the trees began to fall down and the snow turned into ash as everything began to fall apart, as the whole world would collapse on itself. And the system would pop up again, saying, illusion cleared. Tanjiro would wake up just in time to slice some tentacles in half that were about to attack him, and he would bring his sword down with a 360-degree slice, slicing Enmu's nape, killing him. And since the conductor cart came to a sudden halt, it caused all the other carts to slam into each other, causing them to crash. Tanjiro would quickly grab the conductor and hop out of the train, landing safely. Rengoku would appear behind Tanjiro and tell him good job on noticing and getting rid of the actual threat. But it was kind of reckless of you to crash the whole train like that, but everyone is alive. Rengoku would then tell Tanjiro to go help his friends get the people out of the train. Tanjiro would nod his head as he would rush off toward the train carts, hopping in and pulling people out. But while this was happening, a figure would zip through the air and crash into the ground right in front of Rengoku. As the smoke would clear, it would be revealed this was Akaza Upper 3. Their fight would commence and everything would go right toward Kanon. But right as Rengoku used his ninth form, his last-ditch effort to actually kill Akaza, Akaza would use a move of his own to counter this, leaving Rengoku wide open, and as he was about to punch Rengoku right through the torso, Tanjiro would come from below with a slash, slicing his arm off, stopping him from punching Rengoku through the torso. Akaza would quickly jump back and regenerate his arm. By this time, Zenitsu and Inosuke would have gotten done pulling out all of the passengers, and they would rush toward Tanjiro and the extremely injured Rengoku. Zenitsu and Inosuke watched over Rengoku while Tanjiro got up and began to walk toward Akaza. The two would make direct eye contact as they began to get closer and closer to each other as Tanjiro unsheathed his katana and summoned his dagger to his hand. Their walking would turn into running until eventually they made it to each other and they clashed. Akaza would throw punches and kicks toward Tanjiro, and Tanjiro would dodge some of these while also landing a few slices of his own. Their clashing would go on for a minute, and they looked to be about on par with each other, but eventually Akaza's regeneration and stamina proved too much for Tanjiro, and Tanjiro began to slow down. And this would leave Tanjiro wide open, but right before he could be hit by Akaza, his body would fade into a cloud of rainbows. This would confuse Akaza until he would look over and he would see Tanjiro was a distance away on his knee, panting for air. Akaza would say, "How disappointing," as he would slam his foot on the ground and he would use his demon blood art. Tanjiro stood up as his breath got engulfed in flames, and the blade of his dagger and the blade of his katana got engulfed in flames as well. The two would blitz toward each other as they would begin to clash again. Tanjiro began to use sun breathing form after sun breathing form, and Akaza could clearly see that Tanjiro's breathing style looked similar to Rengoku's but was much more superior. Tanjiro would slice off one of Akaza's arms with his dagger, and he would dodge a punch and a kick before stabbing his dagger into Akaza, inflicting bleed and paralyze on Akaza. Blood would begin to spew from Akaza's eyes, nose, and mouth because of the bleed ability, and with him stunned, that gave an opening for Tanjiro to slice him across the chest and use Dominator's Touch to push him back. But as soon as the stun ability wore off, Akaza would regenerate completely as he would pull Tanjiro's dagger out and he would toss it to the side. Tanjiro would be breathing heavily because he now noticed it was way harder to keep up this breathing when in actual combat. Akaza would laugh because he was having fun, and he would call out to Tanjiro and ask him his name. Tanjiro would play along with this and he would yell back, "Tanjiro Kamado." Akaza would then ask Tanjiro to become a demon so they could fight like this forever. Tanjiro would immediately say no, and just the idea of that is stupid. Akaza would say very well then, as he would get pissed off and he would run toward Tanjiro. Tanjiro and Akaza would begin to clash once again, and this time Tanjiro was out of breath and could barely do anything. All Tanjiro can do is just barely dodge and land slight slashes on Akaza, but this was to no avail because Akaza would immediately regenerate. As all Tanjiro could think about was, I need to be stronger and faster. I also need a way to stunt his regeneration. As something in Tanjiro would snap, he would grind his teeth together before yelling out at the top of his lungs. As his movements actually had more force behind them now and more speed, he was able to slice off Akaza's arm and slice him across the stomach. Akaza would laugh because Tanjiro was putting up more of a fight and this was fun. As then Tanjiro would begin to use sun breathing again and he would set his whole insides ablaze. His body would begin to heat up as his breath turned into flames again. As Tanjiro began to scream even louder as red markings in the shape of flames would begin to creep down the left side of Tanjiro's forehead. The screen would pop up and it would say, "New ability required. Demon Slayer mark." Tanjiro's movements began to speed up as his strength increased drastically, as suddenly he would use a sun-breathing slash to cut off Akaza's legs, making him fall backwards. Akaza's laughter and smile would fade away. Akaza would quickly throw a shockwave punch toward Tanjiro to end this fight immediately, but before it could even touch Tanjiro, his arm would be sliced off. Akaza would quickly regrow his legs as he would kick off the ground, making distance between him and Tanjiro. But as soon as he kicked away, he would be immediately grabbed by Tanjiro with his Dominator's touch as he would yank Akaza back toward him. He would then slash Akaza from his forehead all the way down to his torso. But luckily for Akaza, this was only a shallow slash. Akaza would regenerate and regain his footing, as he pulled his hands back as he was about to use his so-called inescapable move, because he was not joking around about this fight anymore. His life was fully at stake. But right before he could use it, Tanjiro would fade into rainbow smoke again. Akaza would grind his teeth together as he would say, "That damn move again." As he would look around and he would say, "Where is it?" And before he could even finish his sentence, Tanjiro would be behind him, as a red tint would begin to fall upon Tanjiro's blade from the base to the tip. And the screen would pop up again and say, "New ability acquired, red blade." Tanjiro's blade would then ignite with flames again as he would slice clean through to Akaza's waistline, separating his lower body and his upper body. Tanjiro would then pull back as he would rush forward using the 13th form of sun breathing. And while using this, he would completely and utterly destroy Akaza. Like literally, he would completely destroy Akaza's upper body, even cutting his head off. But unfortunately, spoiler alert if you read the manga, Akaza can have his head cut off and still live because he has other organs throughout his body. And notice how I said he completely destroyed the upper body of Akaza, not the lower. Akaza actually had very important organs in his lower body that weren't destroyed, so he can regenerate from that. Once Tanjiro completely and utterly destroyed Akaza's upper body, he fell to the ground as the red tint on his blade faded away, same thing with his Demon Slayer mark. Tanjiro's vision became very blurry as he fell unconscious. But as Tanjiro fell unconscious, Akaza's upper body began to regenerate from his lower. Very, very slowly but surely, Akaza's body would begin to regenerate. And also for plot convenience, he did not regain his memories like he did in canon. But as soon as he regenerated all of his body, he began to walk toward Tanjiro. Rengoku grasped his sword as he stood up in attempts to try to go defend Tanjiro. But before Akaza could even make it over to Tanjiro, the sun began to peek over the horizon. Akaza grinded his teeth in frustration as he ran toward the forest, running away from the sun. Tanjiro's dagger, which was laying on the ground not far from him, would disappear and reappear back in his inventory because I can't have him losing that. And not long from then, 2 Demon Slayer Corps members would show up taking the injured Rengoku and the exhausted and unconscious Tanjiro back to the Demon Slayer headquarters. They would immediately begin to treat Rengoku, and the very next day Tanjiro would wake up. He would wake up at the butterfly state and he would begin to walk around until eventually he made his way outside and he ran into a girl flipping a coin sitting on the deck. He would walk up to her and ask curiously what was with the coin. She wouldn't say anything, she would kind of just look at him, but she would flip the coin one more time and it would land on heads. She would then look back at him and say, "I flip it to decide what I'm going to do." She would continue flipping the coin before suddenly Tanjiro would grab it before she could catch it. And he would tell her that she needs to make her own decisions before dropping the coin back in her hand. After dropping the coin back in her hand, he would walk away. The very next day, Tanjiro was assigned a solo mission. Tanjiro would go on this and pass it successfully, and this would go on for about a month or 2. And Tanjiro would go up exactly 9 levels from these missions, putting him at level 110. Also at the end of these 2 months, Rengoku had made somewhat of a recovery, but he was not at full strength, since he was severely injured from his fight with Akaza. he still had many broken bones. But one day when Tanjiro was walking past the butterfly estate, he would hear tons of girls yelling. So Tanjiro would look through the gate and he would see the sound pillar, Tengen Uzui. He would be trying to take Aoi and some of the butterfly estate girls. So Tanjiro would rush over trying to figure out what was going on, and he would quickly ask Tengen what he was doing. He would explain to Tanjiro that he needed to borrow some Demon Slayer Corps members. Tanjiro would then say, "Those girls right there aren't even Demon Slayers, they're just butterfly estate workers." Tengen would then say, "Oh, I don't need them then," as he would drop them down to the ground. But he would continue to hang on to Aoi, as he would say, "This one will still work though." Aoi would call out to Kanao to help her. She would think about what Tanjiro said just a while ago, and without flipping a coin or anything, she would rush over and she would grab Aoi's hand trying to help her. Tanjiro would then speak up to Tengen and he would say, "I'll go in her place no matter what the mission is." Uzui would then say, "You don't really fit the criterias of this mission, I need a female or at least someone that looks like one." Uzui would then say, "You see, you're a bit too tall and mature to pass for any kind of girl." As just then, Zenitsu and Inosuke would walk around the corner as they'd be arguing about something. Tanjiro would look behind him as he would point at them and he would say, "Will they work?" Uzui would squint his eyes and tilt his head as he looked at Inosuke and Zenitsu, and he dropped Aoi and said, "Yeah, I guess they'll work." Uzui would then run past Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu as he would yell out to them to follow him. They would all follow him as they made their journey to the entertainment district. Once they made it to the entertainment district, they would all group up and Uzui would explain everything like he did in canon. How they were going to be looking for his 3 wives that were here gathering information, but then they suddenly went missing. After Tengen explained all of this stuff, Zenitsu and Inosuke got disguised as women, and they were sent to their original houses just like in canon. In fact, a lot of this stuff goes to canon for a little bit. A few days pass, and Inosuke picks up the same amount of information that he did in canon. Zenitsu gets captured by Daki, just like in canon. And after a few days, everyone has their meeting on a rooftop. But obviously Zenitsu isn't there because he was captured by Daki. Tengen would tell Inosuke that he could pull off on the mission if he wanted to because it was getting a bit too dangerous. The meeting would come to an end, and later that night, Inosuke would take back his regular attire and get his Nichiren blades back. He would also locate the hole that was in the house, and he would dislocate his joints and fit through the hole. Once he reached the end of the hole, he would find himself in Daki's little place where she stored all her victims. Here Inosuke would find Zenitsu, 2 of Uzui's wives, and tons of Daki's victims. He would cut many of them free before being attacked by Daki's sash-like things. He would fend off against them and Uzui's 2 wives, and Zenitsu would help him. While this was happening, Uzui would have found out the same information he did in canon, and he would have located his 3rd wife. From here, he would have located the place that he did in canon, and he would have used sound breathing to explode through the ground to get down to Zenitsu, Inosuke, and his 2 wives. But while this was happening, Tanjiro was making his way toward Zenitsu, but suddenly he would catch a sweet scent, the scent of a demon. Tanjiro would follow the scent as he would drop down on the side of a house and he would open up a window. There he would see a demon, and she had sash-like things coming out of her back. This would be Daki. And Daki was trying to fit a woman into her sash as she looked over and she seen Tanjiro. Once Tanjiro seen both of Daki's eyes and recognized that she was upper 6, he knew he had to end this fight quickly because the last time he had an encounter with an upper moon, it didn't go so well. He had many close calls. Daki would then say, "Hashira, but you seem a little bit too weak," and before she could finish her sentence, Tanjiro blitzed to her, immediately unsheathing his katana and slicing her head off. She didn't have any time to react, so she couldn't use her sashes to stop the slice. Even Tanjiro himself would be surprised that he killed an upper moon that quickly. Daki's head and body would fall to the ground, and Tanjiro would sheath his katana and crouch down on her level. He would then ask if she was really an upper moon. She seemed just a bit too weak. Daki would still go on her little tantrum and start crying about how she was really strong, and then she would start crying out for her big brother. As then Tanjiro would realize that her body hasn't even started to disintegrate. As then something would begin to emerge out of Daki's back. As suddenly this thing would fully emerge as it would look at Tanjiro, and Tanjiro would see that this demon also had the upper 6 marking in his eyes. Tanjiro would act quickly, unsheathing his katana and swinging at Gyutaro's neck. But he severely underestimated Gyutaro, and he didn't think that he was any stronger than Daki. So Gyutaro summoned his 2 sickles and put them up, blocking Tanjiro's slash. But despite Tanjiro putting like little to no effort into the slash, Gyutaro was still struggling to hold it back, as then Gyutaro's body would explode with blood slices toward Tanjiro. This would force Tanjiro to jump back as he would cut through all the blood slices, protecting the woman that Daki tried to capture and stopping them from destroying any of the house. But while Tanjiro was doing this, Gyutaro would have fixed Daki's head and placed it back on her shoulders. As then when the smoke cleared after Tanjiro got done slicing through all the blood slashes, Daki would send more sashes toward Tanjiro and Gyutaro would send more blood slices toward him. Tanjiro would slice through all the sashes and the blood slices, as then he would grab the woman and hop outside through the window. But as soon as he hit the ground, so did Daki and Gyutaro. As then Daki would send even more sashes toward Tanjiro. Tanjiro would quickly put down the woman as he would slice through all of them with no difficulty. As then Gyutaro blitzed toward Tanjiro and Tanjiro blitzed toward Gyutaro. They clashed as Tanjiro easily got the upper hand over him. But Daki would send some sashes toward Tanjiro and Tanjiro had to let off on Gyutaro to slice through these. And since Tanjiro let off of Gyutaro, Gyutaro was able to get somewhat of an upper hand. But Tanjiro was easily still holding him back, stopping all of his attacks. But Tanjiro had to correlate between getting rid of Daki's sashes and also defending against Gyutaro. But as he was cutting through Daki's sashes, Gyutaro would use his demon blood art to surround his arms and his sickles with blood slashes. As he would swing toward Tanjiro, Tanjiro would quickly take notice of this as he would try to cut through them with his sword, but his sword would get chipped and he would immediately pull off. Tanjiro would quickly reach into his inventory, pulling out his dagger as he would continue slicing through Daki's sashes with his dagger. As Tanjiro would think to himself that he should probably get a bit more serious and he should probably end this fight. So through the system, he would activate his Demon Slayer mark. He would activate his red blade as he would squeeze down on the hilt of his sword as veins would begin to bulge from his hand, as a red tint would appear on the base to the tip of Tanjiro's sword. Now Tanjiro was using his maximum speed and strength, and this was amped by his Demon Slayer mark. He would quickly slash through all of the remaining sashes nearby him as he would chunk his dagger into Daki's stomach. He would inflict both of its skills on her, making her get stunned and damaging her. Tanjiro's blade would then get engulfed in flames again as he would dodge all of Gyutaro's attacks. He would then come upwards, slicing Gyutaro's hands off, and since he sliced his hands off with a red blade, he could not regenerate immediately. As Tanjiro would not stop going up, and he would continue going until he made it to his neck, slicing his head off. Right after doing this, Tanjiro would blitz over to Daki, and with her not being able to move or her having any more sashes to defend herself, she would immediately get her head sliced off. But Tanjiro could sense it wasn't over, as he would look over and Gyutaro's body was shaking, as blood sickles began to appear out of it. He would immediately blitz over as the body would explode with the tons of blood sickles. But Tanjiro, being at maximum strength and speed with the Demon Slayer mark, would be able to slice through all of these, not allowing any of them to get past him and destroy the district like they did in canon. Tanjiro would deactivate his Demon Slayer mark and his red blade as he would walk over to Gyutaro and Daki's heads, who were now arguing like in canon. As then Daki was about to say that they weren't even related, but Tanjiro would throw his dagger down in front of them, stopping her from talking. He would then say something around the lines like he did in canon, that no one was going to forgive them, so at least they had each other and they should stop arguing, even in their last moments. The siblings would begin to cry as Tanjiro would walk over and stick a syringe into the remains of Gyutaro's mangled body as it began to absorb blood. Tanjiro would pull the syringe out of Gyutaro's mangled body as it began to disappear. A cat would then appear beside Tanjiro as Tanjiro would slip the syringe in the cat's bag that was on its back. He would pet the cat on the head and tell it to say hi to Nezuko for him, as the cat would walk away and disappear. By this time, Gyutaro and Daki's bodies would fully disappear. Tanjiro would level up 10 times, making his level 120, and he would also get an item. He would look in his inventory, and the item would be called Potion of Life, because I definitely didn't forget about the original name. Tanjiro would read the description and it would say it could cure any disease or sickness. Tanjiro would be thinking about who he could give this to and how he could use it. As then it would click for him and he would call his crow over as he would strap the small glass vial to the crow's leg and he would tell it to relay some information to the master. He would tell the crow to tell the master that Upper Six has been dealt with. And he would also tell the crow to give the vial to the master and tell him to drink it. He would send his crow off as it would begin to fly toward the Demon Slayer headquarters. Tanjiro would pick up his dagger, slipping it back into his inventory as he would now look at his katana. It was chipped all over and it was even cracked since he sliced through all the blood sickles. Tanjiro would then think to himself that he was going to have to get this replaced. as then he would think to himself again that he might as well go to the place where it's made, the swordsmith village. He would then sheathe his katana as Uzui and everyone else would come onto the rooftop above him. Tanjiro would look up at everyone and he would yell at them, "It took you long enough." Eventually Tanjiro's crow would get back to Demon Slayer headquarters and it would relay the information to the master. He would be extremely excited about this like he wasn't canon, and he would drink the vial that the crow told him to, and within seconds all the grotesque features on his hands and face would disappear. In fact, he would be completely healed, he would feel completely healthy as well. Also, a couple of days would pass, and Muzan and the Upper Moons would have a meeting about Daki and Gyuteru's death. And that is where I'm going to be ending this what if, because that's how far the anime has went so far. I really do hope all of you guys enjoyed this what if as much as I did. I also thank you for so much support on this series. Discord is linked in the description below, and without further ado, bye.